and shit, and they're famous in their own right. And you shouldn't get like that from just telling the damn news. And, you know, a lot of times they tell lies, they tell bold-faced lies about shit, and get away with it, and I don't believe a fucking thing, you know? Aliens could be breaking my door down, and if the news was telling me it was going on, I wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it. So, they've lost their credibility. It's like a spouse that's cheated, and you brought them back and they cheated again, and you brought them back and they cheated again. It's like, at a certain point, you gotta start blaming yourself. But, yeah, man. No, I hope they go the way of the dodo. Same with PBS, NPR, because none of them are non-biased. You know, National Public Radio, which is paid for by everybody, has been nothing but fucking Trump-hating stuff for years. Hasn't even had Sesame Street or any of that shit on there in a long time either. You know, all these things, and they shouldn't get public funding if they're not going to serve the entire public. You know, it's that simple. That simple. So get them the hell out of there. Send that funding somewhere else. You know, invest it into some online YouTube type news people that actually go out into the field, you know. Even people like that Tyler Oliveira, you know, they go out in the field themselves and put themselves at risk to get these stories. So it's like, I got way more respect for that guy. I don't even really like him. I got way more respect for that guy than I do for freaking any of these yahoos on the news. I don't even know why they call it the news anymore. But, you know, here's the horrible part, though. The people that are still a huge voting and purchasing bloc, the boomers, they still watch that bullshit. They're the ones that give legitimacy to the news and all of their antics, you know? And they have to simultaneously think anything online is bullshit. So, and the people that run the news agencies are also boomers, and they know this. So they lean into it, and it's ridiculous. And it's like, these same boomers, and I got nothing against boomers, don't get me wrong. And at the same time, a lot of these boomers won't let go of shit, you know? They're in politics until they're fucking 100 years old. You know, they want to sit on their house until they've priced out young people completely. And it's like, you know, all that equity ain't going to be worth shit if nobody can afford to buy the damn house, you know? So I don't know what the hell these people are smoking, but must be pretty good. But yeah, so it's like, what are you going to do when nobody can afford to buy that house? You know, all that equity isn't going to be worth shit. It won't be worth nothing. Alright, so we want to throw some strands in here. So yeah, I don't know what the hell the world's gonna do. Sometimes when they say you'll own nothing and be happy, I kind of believe them. I'm like, maybe we will all be, you know, eating cricket powder and enjoying it with no bills. You know, it's, yeah, who knows? Maybe we will. I don't want any cricket powder. I'll pay extra for a steak every time. Every time. Give me the steak. Alright, a little bit more. This is okay. Yeah, so we just throw in these little minute details like this, you know, just throw in some extra green in here. Hardly even tell, but where I'm at, it looks cool. And we got a couple little spots that we gotta fix up here. Green went over there a little bit. Okay. Let's do that. Do that. Yeah, so think whatever God you believe in every day, people. You could be Johnny Salami. Just think of that. You could be Johnny Salami or Vitaly And you could be stuck in fucking, you know, South Korea, rotting away, waiting for something. Who knows? Waiting for somebody to kill you in the middle of the night. Waiting for, you know, that one's straight dead. You know, waiting for a embassy that's not going to help you out. You know, waiting for something. Either way, thank your lucky stars. But you're not Vitaly. You're not Johnny Salami. And when you go to other countries, show some goddamn respect to their monuments and their culture. Because just think about it, like, I know not everybody would, but I know what I would do if I saw some foreigner, you know, pissing on the Lincoln Monument or the Washington Monument or the Jefferson Monument or the Vietnam War Memorial or anything. If I know what I would do. I don't know what you would do, but I know what I would do. So, you know, think of it like that. If Johnny Salami had done that in America, go to the Vietnam War Memorial and piss on it or whatever, you know. See what happens. See what happens, bro. So you put it in that context, I think it's a lot easier to understand why they got upset. You know, especially in the historical context. Like South Korea during World War II was like a puppet state of Japan. They're so close, you know. And they were taken over and almost eradicated. The Japanese were very brutal in World War II. I think, you know, because we live in a day and age where it's a lot easier to point the finger at the white man, you know, people kind of overanalyze what Hitler did in World War II and underanalyze what the Japanese did, especially since they ended up getting nuked. I think people, like, historically kind of feel bad for them, especially since they turned out to be a very peaceful country in the end. But at the time, they were quite fierce, you know. The last thing you wanted, if you were a soldier, is to be caught by the Japanese, because they would fuck you up. So, gotta be careful of that. And, but yeah, the Japanese were very brutal. You know, the Busan Walk or whatever, where they killed all those prisoners, had them march from, you know, one spot to another. Yeah, the Japanese were horrible. But anyway, they had, in South Korea, they had all the females were concubines, you know, forced concubines of the freaking Japanese, you know, warlord or whatever. So, a Japanese general or whoever was running shit. And, yeah, so these women were forced indentured slaves to the Japanese, you know, war commanders. And they made these monuments to these women who, you know, survived this horrific shit. And, you know, put it up in Korea. And I doubt there was a single person that ever desecrated them. There's a word you don't use very often, desecration. That's what he did, he desecrated them. And you don't see that kind of stuff very often, you know? So, like, what he did was, you know, kind of inexcusable. And I hope they throw the book at him, you know, for that transgression. You know, kicking him out of the country isn't good enough. You know, that's what they did in Japan. They kicked Johnny Salami out of the country. And then he just went over to South Korea and started messing around over there. So yeah, like I said, throw the book at him. Throw the book at him, and then go pick it up and throw it at him again. Because he's a pot licker and he deserves it. Alright, we got our little kitty cat here. He's just a black and white kitty. Or like a gray, you know, tabby cat. That's why this guy's like, oh my god, there's a lion right there. Okay, what kind of eyes should he have? He should have like a little, gotta kind of give him a, sort of a pinkish nose here and paws. And a little pink nose. Like such. Always loved cats. I've always loved their fuck you nature, you know? Always, always, always. Over a dog. You know, dogs are cool, don't get me wrong. Dogs are cool because you can, like, take them places. They listen, you know, they can defend you. That kind of thing, you know. Cats are cool just because they're like, I don't know. You gotta be a cat person to know what I'm talking about, but cats are cool. Something about them is cool. I can't really describe it. But it's like having your own little lion, you know? It's like having your own little lion. And that's cool. We got his little paws there now. We got that going on. Let's color his eyes and the rest of his paw there. I'll make it a little. What color this is? What is this? Yeah, like I said, I need new markers. Let them sit. That's okay. I've used them quite a bit. Yep, New Year's, you know. I slept right through New Year's the other day. I don't know what all of you guys did. Hopefully you had a good time and were safe. Got home safe. Didn't get arrested. A lot of places had a lot of issues in the world. Europe had all sorts of problems going on from their new residents. They're going to have a lot of clashes over there. Because of, you know, a lot of the new migrants are, you know, Islamic, and, you know, obviously, you know, Europe is more of a Christian land, you know, by default. So I think there's going to be probably a lot of issues. Unfortunately, it'd be nice if Islam and Christians can get along, but it just doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. I think they're just so fundamentally opposed to each other, you know, that it's just, you know, it's just never going to happen, unfortunately. That's too bad, because they got a lot to offer each other, you know. Yeah, they got a lot to offer each other. I've always been kind of fascinated by Arabic culture. Not so much Islam, but like pre-Islam, you know, like Persian type, you know. Always been fascinated with that. And how different times in history, you know, Islam, or not Islam, but the Arab world and the Western world got intertwined, you know. Like during the Dark Ages, I'm pretty sure it was because of Arab scholars that a lot of the Greek and Roman knowledge was preserved, you know, which is cool. Because they recognized that the society was collapsing, at least to the degree that it was, you know, needed the help. So that's cool, you know. I'm all about saving knowledge, you know. I'm a collector. I've always liked collecting stuff. I'll always love collecting stuff. And, you know, one day, my goal is to take everything I collect and put it in a huge time capsule and bury the capsule somewhere. That's my goal. Hopefully it gets carried out. Alright, what kind of eyeballs should this kitty cat have? Some kind of like deep, crazy yellow. Let me see here. Let's try these guys out. Alright. Cat eye. Yep, always been fascinated in it, you know, in the Crusades and the juxtaposition between how the West and the Middle East and the East have dealt with each other throughout the years. You know, how the West has always been a lot more open to diversity than the other two cultures. You know, if you go to the Middle East, it's predominantly Middle East. If you go to Asia, it's predominantly Asian. Yes, they have some people that are there, but for the most part, they're what they are. But then when you go to the West, even back in the Roman days, there was, you know, you'd go to Rome and there'd be, you know, people from Africa and Asia and stuff living and enslaved. And it's just crazy to think that that kind of stuff, you know, the Western culture's always been a lot more open to having other cultures around. And that's interesting when you think about it, you know. Like, I wonder why that is. I mean, yeah, part of it has to do with conquest, but not all of it. You know, not everything. You know, not everything was like that back then. Yeah, you know, anybody could be a slave back in them days. You know, somebody as white as me could be a slave. You know, and it's just, slaves back then were just like slaves today. You know, they were sold by their own kind. You know, that's something they don't like saying in the history books, is like, you know, the African slave trade existed because of cooperation between Europeans and other Africans, pretty much, you know. We didn't just roll up, you know, a couple ships with, you know, a few hundred scurvy-ridden sailors didn't just roll up on, you know, tribes in the thousands of jacked Zulu people and just took them, you know. Not even with muskets and horses and cannons and shit. It took collaboration. The Zulu tribes were always fighting, and when they were done fighting, they would take slaves, and that's what they did. You know, they would take slaves from the other side. They would take booty, you know. They would take the kids and raise them. They would take the women and use them, and they'd take their lands and their shit, and that's just what they did. That's what everybody does. But, yeah. So it's like, fuck, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But that's how it went down then, and that's how it goes down today. Unfortunately, you know. They say there's more slaves that exist today in the world than during the height of the transatlantic slave trade, which is crazy. And that even goes